Hit me.
From Studio A in Arcata, behind the redwood curtain, it's time for...
Succotash.
Yes, Succotash, the comedy soundcast featuring snippets from comedy.
Soundcast.
And also interviews with comedians, comedian soundcasters, and other showbiz folk. And now, here's this episode's host from up the coast, the man who puts the X in Xbox and the tie on antisocial, comedy soundcaster, Tyson Saner.
Saner. Insaner.
Salutone, that's me, Tyson Saner. Welcome to episode 275 of Succotash. I'm glad you found us. We've been here for over 10 years now, bringing clips of soundcasts from more or less around the globe to your ears to sample in hopes that you might hear something you like and would like to hear more of. More of other people's soundcasts, specifically. Last week in Epi275, my co-host and your every other show host, Marc Hershon, brought you what he referred to as, quote, a full rack of clips, unquote. And I concur. He brought you clips from the soundcasts for what it's worth, Storytime with Seth Rogen, How to Survive with Danielle and Kristine, and Films to be Buried with Brett Goldstein. He also featured a bonus clip of a soundcast called What Are You Watching?, hosted by soundcaster and friend of the show, Chris Mancini. The clip was from a recent episode that none other than Marc Hershon was a guest on. Lots of great content in that episode of Succotash. This, however, is episode 275, and I've got 3 clips, one apiece from the soundcast known as Dragon Talk, Cinemasker Podcast, and Metaphysical Milkshake with Rain and Reza. I'm sure I will be including a classic advert from our longtime fake sponsor, Henderson's Pants, to round things out nicely. And I'm using air quotes when I say round things out because I am not sure I'm using it correctly in this context. Anyone? Anywho, let's get to the clips. First, Dragon Talk, an official Dungeons & Dragons podcast from Wizards of the Coast. In its description it says, go inside the walls of Dungeons & Dragons for exclusive interviews and previews. The D&D team sits down each week with celebrities and personalities from across gaming and pop culture to discuss one of the greatest fantasy brands of all time. We'll talk about the tabletop role-playing game and the latest in D&D video games, comics, novels, movies, and television. So I've taken this clip from an episode from May 21st, 2020. Went back in time a little bit. And this episode is called Jeff Cannata, Random Character Generator with Kate Welch. And its description says, have you checked out all the great shows on our Twitch channel? Greg and Shelly open our show with the latest D&D news, along with mentioning some of the great shows streaming on Twitch TV/D&D right now. That will both entertain and help with your own virtual games. Later, our very own Kate Welch returns for another episode of Random Character Generator. Make sure you check out the D&D Beyond character sheet to use in your games as well. Our special guest this week is actor and comedian Jeff Cannata. I've chosen a clip from the very beginning of the episode with Jeff Cannata, who used to be on a internet video program that also went to audio form podcast or soundcast called The Totally Rad Show that I've seen probably every episode of many years ago. So enjoy.
Welcome everyone, Jeff Cannata to Dragon Talk.
Yay! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here.
You
this
feel
is awesome.
Love? You feel the love of the studio audience?
It's incredible. There's so many people
it's crazy.
in this studio audience.
I know, just packed in here.
You guys
so
really...
cool,
You're my favorite. I loved you on Scandal.
My one Scandal fan.
I'm going to save that because I got questions.
Okay.
You were on Scandal?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I did an episode of Scandal, one episode.
That's all it takes, man. That is all it takes.
Yeah.
And that is actually the real reason why you're here.
That's right.
Well, whatever it takes to get me through the door, you know what I'm saying?
What's Kerry Washington really like?
Hey, that's one of my questions.
I got dirt. No, I'm just kidding. She was delightful.
I will. I was saving that. I couldn't hold it in. I was actually so excited.
Shelly's burying the lead.
I know.
I kind of did. I mean, people listening might know you from Dungeon Room.
I hope so.
I know you from Scandal.
Fair enough. I'll take it.
They're like, oh, the Scandal guy plays D&D? That's cool.
Yeah.
Sure.
The Scandal guy.
That was the top line of all of your bios. Was like,
It is.
you may know him from Scandal. But gosh, you've been doing this type of thing for a long time, right?
Yeah.
When did you start?
We started the Totally Rad show at the beginning of 2007.
Wow.
We were conceptualizing it in 2006. So it was, it's a long time. In the internet years, that's even longer because internet years go by faster. We were doing that show before YouTube, really.
Wow.
And it was like a video podcast before there were video podcasts, really. There were very few of them. And we figured out how to do green screen before there was like plugins for green screen. It was Wild West back then.
It
That's
is
crazy.
amazing being
And I do remember that there was, because we before we started recording, we discovered that we do in fact know each other, that we have actually worked together.
Yes, it's been lifetimes, but yes, it is.
Sometime, like maybe for the 4th edition, I don't know if I was involved in that, but definitely there was a time in between 4th and 5th when we were at PAX and we had this D&D bus that we had wrapped, and it was like all retro and it was super cool. And
it was awesome. It was a full-size Beholder you guys had like in the parking lot. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yep. I remember.
I saw a picture of me and standing in front of that somewhere.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So it took me a minute to make that connection. But yes, I do remember working with you guys.
It's kind of hard to imagine now where D&D rules the world and everyone knows it and everyone plays it. But there was a time back then when it was really a niche of a niche, and we were trying to help get the word out on D&D. It just seems impossible to even fathom that it was a smaller community back then. It really has grown, and I love the fact that it has grown, but it's some people don't remember how it's not that long ago, but it was it was a different landscape back then.
Absolutely. When I started doing game journalism stuff around that same time period as you, 2006, 2007, it was pulling teeth trying to get editors and everyone to be like, well, I mean, the audience isn't that big, even though you're really passionate about it. And it was just always this, we're about video games, and that's what it's all about. And I'm like, but it's so close, and there's so much more to talk about, and you're not, tapping into this audience. And you're right, it was a different time, and it's so cool to see that transition. Yeah,
I agree. It's really wild back then. I mean, I think the whole geek universe was just blossoming at that point. We for the Totally Rad show, when we were doing that show, we won a Webby Award. He said, casually throwing it off.
The outlet that I worked for also won a Webby Award.
Yeah, all right. So Webby high five. Yeah. But the only reason I brought it up is because when you win a Webby, you have 5 words that you're able to give. That's their gimmick was, at least back then. I don't even know if that's still true, but your acceptance speech is supposed to be 5 words. And our 5 words when we won were nerd is the new cool. And when we said that in 2007, we thought it was like this anthem that was kind of not really true, but we were going to make it true, And then in just a few years, it is undeniably true. And it almost feels pat and trite to say nerd is cool, because obviously all the biggest movies, the biggest books, the biggest TV shows, everything is nerd culture now,
Right.
Yeah.
It's so much so that it's not even nerd culture.
Right. It's culture. Yes.
It's just,
absolutely.
There'll be a time when we tell our kids, back in the day, Greg Tito used to get made fun of for liking Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's what I always say. Nerd. I was a nerd when nerd meant nerd. You know? Yeah.
All right. Well, so the show itself does not have a dedicated Twitter account. Here are the people involved in this particular episode that do have social media accounts. Jeff Cannata can be reached on Twitter at all lowercase JEFFCANNATA. Kate Welch does not have a Twitter that I can find, but she is on Instagram at Kate Welch, and that is KATE, all lowercase WELCHHHH. Yes, that is 4 H's. So it's Kate Welch and then 3 additional H's. Greg Tito can be found on Twitter at Greg Tito, capital GREGTITO, and Shelly Mazzanoble can be found at Shelly Moo. That is all lowercase SHELLYMOO. And you can find the show, aside from anywhere you listen to Soundcast, you can find it at dnd.wizards.com/dragon-talk/podcast-hub. That is dnd.wizards.com/dragon-talk/podcast-hub. Next up, Cinemasker podcast from Screenwave Media. Its show description says, the crew of Cinemasker, and then in parentheses, James, Kieran, and Justin, are out of the nerd room and into your ear holes. They chat about their lives and the stuff they love, movies, games, and making videos. You'll also hear about behind-the-scenes antics, anecdotes about being longtime YouTubers, and a ton of obscure pop culture crap. It's the off-the-cuff banter from rental reviews mixed with an AVGN panel every Thursday. For those of you who don't know, AVGN stands for Angry Video Game Nerd. So the clip I've chosen is from a show very recently, from September 21st, 2021. The episode is called Why Do We Destroy Video Games? And then Bigfoot and Re-Editing Star Wars. This is the 7th episode of the Cinemasker podcast. So the clip I've chosen is from part of the Bigfoot discussion.
I know you wanted there was a segment you wanted to do about Bigfoot, I think.
Do you want to do that now?
Yeah, let's do it now.
All right,
we're
doing
talking
it now.
about
Okay.
spooky shit.
Okay, so there's a segment I want to do on this podcast, and we're going to, do this every once in a while. It's not guaranteed every single podcast, but it's something we'll do from time to time, where we're just going to talk about an urban legend and just tell us if you think it's real or not, just based on your own intuition. This isn't heavily researched or anything. We could research and then come back later on the same topic. So that could always happen. But we want to hear what people think. So, write us in and tell us if you think it's real or not. So I'm going to start it off. Basically, I want to ask you guys a question, all right? So, do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
As much as I appreciate the Ghostbusters nod, no, I do not.
Now, the correct answer is if there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe anything you say.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of what's going on here.
And this begins today's segment of Is It Fucking Real? Bigfoot. What do you think? Is Bigfoot real or not? And you don't have to know the answer because none of us do. It's just what do you really think?
I mean,
yeah,
he's right here.
No, I don't know. I think honestly, I think Bigfoot might have just been like an escaped orangutan or something like that. Something like,
and there's just one, or is there?
I don't know. Like that. Well, I did see something recently that like someone took a picture of a Bigfoot and they were like, look at this, like we found it or whatever, and or video or something, and they actually said like there was no faking in it or something.
Well, there was are you thinking of the famous 1967 Patterson film?
No, not
okay.
It was new. It was actually like
newer.
recent. Yeah,
okay.
this and they gave it to like but the thing is like I don't know. It could be. It might be some weird hyper intelligent being that just lives in the woods and it stalks people and stuff like that. And people go missing all the time, so you don't really know. Like it could grab someone off a trail and just
that might be the
eat
Wendigo
them or something. Maybe, who knows? I mean, the thing is too, like when you look at like old, like there's those old weird animals that were in between dinosaurs and humans, like the giant horses and weird sloths and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the big capybara.
Yeah. And it's like you don't know if like maybe one of those things is still around. Because I mean, look at like things like turtles and crocodiles that live to be like,
the coelacanth was basically like finding a living dinosaur when they found that. That was like in the 30s, I think.
That's the thing.
But we're not talking about lake monsters. We'll get to that another time.
It could just be some weird. And also, too, there's so many areas of the earth that like people have never been to and have never even discovered certain species of animals and stuff like that.
That's kind of like the movie The Abyss. Like you don't know what's down there.
Yeah. Or Descent, like too. Like, did you ever see that? Where it's like the weird bat people that live in the caves. And it's like these people that go...
The Descent, that's a great movie.
Yeah, that scared the shit out of me, too. Like, 'cause that part when the cave... I feel like the movie was scary even before the bat people showed up.
It was, yeah.
When they were in the cave.
When they were trapped, when they're just climbing through.
Oh, my God, scared the crap out of me.
Like it caves in, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you don't know if... with all the uncharted parts of Earth and under the water, there's those giant fucking squids and shit.
I mean, the thing is, Bigfoot lies in the woods. It's usually the woods, unless it's the Yeti in the Himalayas.
And this is like the Pacific Northwest Sasquatchy.
Yeah,
Traditionally, it's more like I mean, it's big in Portland. I remember we went to the Portland Gaming Expo.
Yep.
Bigfoot was everywhere.
Yeah,
and we were just like, wow, I guess Bigfoot's really
well,
popular.
Harry
in
and
this
the
area.
Hendersons took place in wasn't that Seattle?
South of Seattle.
Yeah. That's where they lived. And I remember when we went there, too, I was like, wow, this literally looks like Harry and the Hendersons when you get to the neighborhoods and stuff in Seattle.
North Carolina, I went to Orlando in May, and I drove down from Pennsylvania, because why not?
Yeah.
And I stopped at all this crazy stuff on the way. Almost died a few times. Talk about that later. And I almost fell in a sinkhole where a nuclear bomb was dropped on America accidentally, but it didn't blow up. I fell in the hole. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
So I stopped in Littleton, North Carolina. There is the Cryptological and Zoological Museum. And they have like a giant Bigfoot, and they have like the prints, and they have a map where they've been seeing it in the area. So I guess Bigfoot moved from Seattle to North Carolina. Cheaper living. Makes sense.
I mean, there could be just more than one.
Well, there's got there's got to be if there's like if it's been alive for all these
It might just imagine this, like imagine something with comparable intelligence to us that doesn't want to go near a person, that lives in the woods, that could easily know, that knows all the places about it. Like it's almost like imagine if you were hiding in your house and something was there and you were stalking, so you know all the places to hide. So maybe we just haven't seen them. Maybe they are just really good at hiding and they know each inch of the woods.
Yeah, but how many would you need to make a stable population enough to reproduce?
Maybe they just live really long.
I've been watching the Angry Video Game Nerd videos for quite a long time now. They used to be on a web hosting service. I don't know what it's called. Called Screw Attack, and they're on YouTube now. But there's a lot of comedy to be had. And if you like retro video games, or if you hate retro video games even, it's pretty entertaining material. So the show does not have a dedicated Twitter account. However, you can find James Rolfe on Twitter at Cinemasker. That is all lowercase, CINEMASSACRE. Kieran Fallon can be found at Kieran. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a capital KIEEEEERN. That is capital K-I, 5 E's, and then an R and an N. Justin Silverman can be found at Justy Silverman. That's capital J-U-S-T-Y, capital S-I-L-V-E-R-M-A-N. And you go to Cinemasker.com to find everything, including the podcast. If you want the long form, it's Cinemasker. That is the word cinema, and then sakra, and then sucker, and then it's the word cinema and the word massacre, portmanteaued. Portmanteau? Portmanteaued. Just CINEMASSACRE.com/category/Cinemasker-podcast/. Just go to Cinemasker.com. They also do the show on YouTube.
Hello, friends. Bill Haywatt here. Are you disappointed with pants that don't live up to the hype? Are you sick and tired of pants that don't fulfill the promise of their name? Well, the good folks at Henderson's Pants want you to know that they take their craft seriously. Oh, very seriously. And that's why they're proud to introduce their new Henderson's Coveralls. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold on one second, mister. I've seen coveralls before, that staple of the farming, construction, and automotive repair communities. Well, that's true, friends, but admit it, you harbor a deep disappointment when you find that traditional coveralls don't actually cover all. Oh, not even close. Traditional coveralls annoyingly leave the feet, neck, and cranium completely exposed, which is tantamount to false advertising. Until now. Henderson's has taken the coverall concept to a whole new level by eliminating the annoying pant holes, sleeves, and neckline, then installing a single zipper that encloses 3 sides of this rectangular garment. You get a warm, durable fabric that covers your entire body. Truly a coverall for all. Originally designed for disaster relief areas, tsunami-prone beaches, and plane crash cleanups, the design of the Henderson's coveralls has nothing to do with rumors of a recent contract that fell through for Henderson's to provide 10,000 body bags to FEMA. That's Henderson's, makers of stuffed sacks and ditty bags since 1834. And now back to Succotash. Take it away, Marco.
Thank you, Bill Haywatt. Polo? Finally tonight, Metaphysical Milkshake with Rain and Reza from Cast Media. That's capital K-A-S-T. Its description says, a weekly podcast, Metaphysical Milkshake, the show where we go deep, we get weird, and we search for the meaning of life along the way. In this show, your co-hosts in Existential Crimes, actor Rainn Wilson and scholar Reza Aslan, guide you through conversations about life's big questions. The clip I've chosen is another one from September 1st, 2021. It's called Jason Isbell, Where Does Music Come From? Its description is brief. It says Rainn and Reza sit down with Grammy-winning musician Jason Isbell to ask, where does music come from?
You know, the topic of our conversation is like, where does music come from? And obviously we're starting with you with some of the personal, like, who's Jason Isbell? Where does it come from culturally, historically, environmentally? Personally, I'd love to hear more about, I know you've talked about it a lot, but how unsobriety and drinking culture influenced your music early on, and then how sobriety influences your music later. But since you brought up the Pentecostal thing, that's something that is really, because Reza and I are both, you know, religious scholars. He's a professional religious scholar. I'm an amateur. But, you know, this Pentecostal idea and Pentecostalism, you know, brought music really hardcore into the churches.
Yeah, they had live electric music.
Like rock bands.
Nowadays, whether you're a Christian or not, you know that like most churches, you go there and it's like drums and a guitar and there's like a huge worship and everybody's dancing and going crazy and stuff. And people don't realize Pentecostalism invented that. Like before Pentecostalism, singing at church was, a mighty fortress is our God.
Mm-hmm.
Then after Pentecostalism, it was like, wow!
Oh, yeah.
That must have been, for somebody who, you know, obviously had this childhood love of music, to see that in church married to spirituality and religion. And I love what you were saying, how like everything is a metaphor for the passion of Christ. You know, I mean, that must have had a huge effect on you, right?
It was. Yeah, that was everything. That was everything, you know. And I have managed to leave most of the guilt and the shame behind me on the path, but I kept the Holy Ghost fire, you know. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I did keep that sort of, you know, magic alive in a lot of ways. And that was how I bonded with my family. Like I was super close to my grandparents, you know, even when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, because I'd grown up playing music with them. We played music together and we watched baseball because that was the only thing we could watch where nobody would say the F word or show a titty or anything, you know. So we watched baseball and we played music together, and we got along even in the ages where you don't usually want to spend time with your grandparents. And it was because of that. Like they understood the rock and roll part of their spirituality, and so they understood the rock and roll part of me a little bit better.
But going even broader, what is this connection between, you talked about the fire of the Holy Ghost, and I love that because really we'll get to this later, but the Holy Spirit, isn't that just analogous to the muses of ancient Greece? But why do you think music goes hand in hand with worship? What is it about the passion of music, how music opens us up, that from the beginning of human history, there's been dancing and music going hand in hand with worship. You've rarely had worship without it.
Yeah, that's how we keep the record. You know, that's how we write it down when we don't know how to write, when we don't have anything to write on.
We sing it.
We sing it, and that way we remember it. And then when we sing it, you know, rhythm has an organic connection with how you feel and how your brain feels and how you move, and that part is just, I think, biology. I think you can't help but, you know, your heart rate elevates and it brings something out of you. But I think originally we sang it to remember it, you know, and I think that's the part that's really sort of sacred to me about music, because, you know, growing up in Alabama the way I did, I didn't know any black people. You know, we were all just poor white people, you know, and by poor, I mean, you know, fine. But, you know, we were all in the same boat down there, and everybody was working and nobody was ahead. We had what we needed, but we were a very sort of exclusionary sort of community down there. And I didn't know anybody who looked different from me until I got into high school. So, you know, growing up down there, the only exposure I had to the Black American experience was that music. And I started listening to that and thinking, oh, no. What I've heard about these folks can't be true. You know, because the truth of it is they feel like this. And if they feel like this and they sound like this, then they got to be more like me than they are different from me. That's because they were keeping the record and they were passing that information to me. I was not going to go pick up and read a book about it, but I was going to listen to the music, you know.
That makes so much sense. This idea that like the emotion that's being conveyed by these different genres played by different, you know, races, different ethnicities, it becomes so familiar that you think to yourself, well, I felt that. So there must not be that much separating us, I guess.
Yeah, that was how it was for me. And then I started going and reading about it and actually getting to know people and asking the questions. But where I grew up, that was just not in the town, Green Hill, Alabama, there was nobody but white kids, you know. And so my first exposure to anybody's life that was different from mine was through music. And then I understood, oh, okay, this is how they get the truth across to people who wouldn't listen otherwise, you know.
So the social media links that they've included with the description of the show are their Instagram accounts, where Rainn Wilson is spelled RainnWilson, and Reza Aslan is spelled Rezaaslan. And that's exactly what it is for them on Twitter, including being all lowercase. So once again, that is all lowercase RainnWilson, and Reza Aslan is all lowercase Rezaaslan. Jason Isbell, you found it capital Jason, capital Ispell on Twitter, and the show is on Twitter at Meta Milk Podcast. That is capital META, capital MILK, capital PODCAST. And there you have it. That was, I believe, a pretty decent selection of audio from other people's soundcasts. I do enjoy listening to other people have conversations about all sorts of things. Were it not for being involved with this particular soundcast for the number of years that I have, I don't know if I would have ever heard the variety or sheer amount of other people's conversations. I do have soundcasts that I listen to regularly, meaning that I will hear every episode they post as soon as possible after they post, and I feel very fortunate to be able to do so. I think it has made me a better listener in general somehow. Perhaps it functions the same way practicing anything theoretically is supposed to. I really don't know. Anyway, next week Marc Hershon will be back with more content in Epi276, and I should be back the week after that, if that is indeed what the future has in store for me. I'm still making video gaming content for my YouTube channel, which you can find by searching my name, Tyson Saner, in YouTube, or you can go to www.tysonsaner.com, TysonSaner, to find a direct link to my channel, as well as to various other entertainment endeavors I have been a part of in my improbably fortunate existence. Thank you for listening. Be decent to each other, and if anyone asks you if you have heard anything interesting recently, and that thing happens to be any of the content in this episode, won't you please pass the Succotash?
You've been listening to Succotash, the comedy soundcast, with your host, Tyson Saner. Brought to you by Henderson's Pants and...
Imagine your company's name right here.
Rate us and review us at Apple and Google Podcasts. Find us on the web at succotashshow.com, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio, on YouTube,
on SoundCloud,
and wherever fine soundcasts are streamed and
or downloaded.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Succotash Show. Like us on Facebook. Email us at tyson@succotashshow.com or call into the Succotash Skype line at our toll call number 818-921-7212.
That number again is 818-921-7212.
You can also upload clips from your favorite comedy soundcasts directly to us using our direct upload link at hightail.com/u/soundcasts. Succotash. Succotash is produced and engineered by Joe Paulino through the auspices of Studio P Sausalito, the home of the hit. Our hosts are Marc Hershon and Tyson Sainer. Our musical director is
Scott Carvey.
Our booth assistant is
Kenny Durges.
Succotash is executive produced by Marc Hershon. Until next time, I'm your loyal booth announcer, Bill Haywatt, reminding you to please pass the Succotash. Goodbye. This has been a Succotash Patch production.